everybody. Welcome back to Earth and Star Spiritual Wellness Center. Today we have Jacob Cooper with us, who happens to be kind of a big deal. Is that right, Jacob?
Oh, well, thank you so much for that. I don't see myself that way, but some may perceive that. I'm just merely the reflection of, I guess, what you want to see.
I should say that Jacob does a lot of amazing work with mental health and that therapy in that area, but he's also an author and does a lot of speaking work at seminars. He's friends and trained with a lot of amazing people who probably you guys have even heard of, because these are really big things that are connecting us all over the world. When we have these metaphysical conversations, the point of them is to shine lights in different parts of the world and start making those connections. And Jacob is one of those people who does that so well through all of this different training. And you do not just past life regression. I know you do past life regression, but you also regress between lives. Is
Hmm.
that right?
Yeah, it's. I love talking about, life between lives or between life soul regression. I think something that got me into it was a lot of people would come up to me and hear my near-death experience and feel a little bit maybe left out or disenfranchised that they didn't have that same experience. And, I take an empowered approach wherever I go, first of all, but second of all, when you experience what I did on the other side, there comes a point in time where you experience something so beautiful, you want to just share that and take everyone with you on that journey, and not leave people out. And so, certainly, I'm not in any type of medical position to have self induced near death experience, nor, would I support that in any way. But the beautiful thing about hypnotherapy, in particular, in between life soul regression therapy, is that you don't have to have something physically traumatic, debilitating to have these, degrees of spiritual awareness, or some would call non-ordinary states of consciousness. They could have that just simply by induced relaxation. But between life soul regression is absolutely profound, and I don't know if you or your viewers would be really interested in learning a little bit about the backstory of it and really what it can do for, someone who would come to, let's say, my office or do something remote, because I've been seeing some profound revelations throughout these sessions.
I would love that, actually, because I am one of those people who I hear these stories and I'm like, I've never had a near death experience. But then I have like so many gifted visions. But I also feel like regression can help people learn different things, and ego death is one of those things that we go through. So you don't have to have a physical death experience to still go through the ego death of
Mhm.
the soul leveling up and having that expansion and that growth. But please do tell us the backstory of all of this.
Yeah, when people kind of come to my office, I'm sure you have the same thing. Some of the most commonly asked questions that people have these days is, who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going, when this is all said and done? And between life soul regression is a really powerful way to address all those questions. It was really made into a universal household name by an individual by the name of Dr. Michael Newton, who wrote, some of the, best-selling books that people may know of, that, have really transformed a lot of lives, including The Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls. A little bit of a backstory about Dr. Michael Newton. He wasn't someone who was a hard believer in this stuff, probably more of a skeptic, if you will. But he, basically had a client come into his office. The client was having some pain on their side, from my understanding. And Michael just said, okay, let's go to the source of that pain. And the client went directly to a past life in which she was in World War One, I believed, and lost her life. Fine. But Michael, being probably the hard skeptic that he was able to kind of grill this person on her exact battalion, department, all these things that no way would this person know in specifics. And they were able to do some research on it, and was a large degree of evidence, of this, past life. And so this led Michael to really using the source when clients would go to him for stuff to really go directly to, the exact source of what they're experiencing. And then another client a little bit, after came to Michael, and he did that same thing to go to the source of what they were going through. And all of a sudden, this client went directly to the source. She went to, her life on the other side. She was reunited with her soul pod, which is a group of family members that we frequently come in with into this lifetime and that we're connected to on the other side. And this client was able to describe beings of light around her, and this soul pod in this gathering of these beings of light that were around her. And that really fascinated Michael. And so Michael really got more in depth into this stuff and was really able to help people to not just go to a past life, which, between life soul regression is really, the past life regression is the appetizer, but people are able to go to their memories on the other side, including the blueprint of their lives, the charting phase of their lives, in which people are able to remember with their council of elders or maybe their spirit guides, the life that they planned before this. And so that is completely transformative in a sense, because one of the most pivotal questions proposed by one of the most brilliant minds of all time, Albert Einstein, once said, is life, random, a series of events? Is life, organized, or is life somewhere in between? And so once you know that life has this this organized design, or as some would call God, this guiding organized design, then all of a sudden, that really could help out resilience, resolve, a sense of purpose, and experiencing life through such a deeper angle, and to allow someone to, really experience that victor of circumstances versus victim of circumstance.
Mhm.
But essentially, it's a very deep, gear of hypnotherapy that we take clients in which they're able to remember all the beings around them, the life that they planned before they got here, understanding how they're progressing on a soul level, right? That's a big question that people have, is how am I doing? Am I on track? As well as understanding their different soul types. Not, clients have different soul colors, and usually the deeper the color, the more evolved of a soul that they are. And usually the lighter the color, generally, the more newer they are. And again, there's no hierarchy over there. It's all about diversity. And so we can learn from the older souls as much as we could, the younger souls are there to influence us too. So we could all learn from one another, and that's the beauty of life, is the just a diverse, eclectic, broad view. But it's profound. And one of the most fascinating aspects about between life soul regressions to me is that not all clients come from the same aspect on the other side, and the origins of clients' souls may be different. Some clients may be more earth based, where they have a lot more of a resonance with the planet. Some clients may be more of the angelic realm souls, where their soul's origin and home on the other side is more tuned into the angelic. And some, may be of the interplanetary nature or the IP nature, where they're more connected to the greater celestials, if you will. So it's and planets and stuff like that. So it's just fascinating, but it makes a lot of sense as to having people understand why they are the way that they are, and why some people have a harder time, being in this body, in this life, due to the fact that it may feel a little less foreign than the person next to you, given your soul type and soul level.
I 1000% subscribe to all of that. And I think that you'll find most of our viewers here do as well, because this is the work that we do.
Mhm.
Um, when we do past life regression together, basically what we're looking for is to solve a problem, right? That's usually why we go into something like that. I've seen with my clients,
Mhm.
it's usually not just curiosity. Usually
Mhm.
there's something there that is an irritant.
mhm,
whether it's a physical pain or an emotional pain or just being stuck, unable to kind of reach that purpose space. And when we go into the soul, the past life regression, we do soul retrieval. We find the core moment, like you said, that first time that this particular wounding happened, because every wounding in every life after
mhm,
that is just a repeating cycle till it gets healed. So we like to go to that core wounding to pull that out, to offer healing to it, to restore the soul. And even the understanding that these aren't all going to be lives on earth. Like you said, a lot of
mhm,
these, surprisingly to these people, are lives on other planets, interdimensional lives, things like that. What I would like to dive more deeply into, if you want to, is the blueprint, because that's the one when we're stuck on destiny or maybe just curious about things, or how can I expand my current gifts and
mhm,
really tap into who I'm meant to be in this life. That's going to be the thing that's really important.
mhm.
What is this blueprint of life that we set up before we incarnate?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Mary. I think for people before they get here, and from my experience in doing these regressions and studying a lot of the case studies from Michael, I mean, he's regressed, thousands upon thousands of people that are referenced in this book. I mean, not all case studies are referenced in his book, but there's experience, he's had a lot of research on this. From my understanding, and from personal and professional data driven stuff to really validate what I've seen personally is that before we come into this body, we meet with our primary guides usually. Some souls who are very evolved, their primary guide is generally their higher self, but that's very rare. Most of us have probably one to two primary spiritual guides before we get into this body. And before we're coming to this body, we stand in front of what's called a council of elders, or some would call the council of wisdom. But I think to me, the council of elders is something that kind of sticks more, and that's more so from what people say in the regressions. And these are beings that is a group. There's usually a chief elder over there, that's dressed a little bit differently than the others. But again, it's complete love, complete understanding, and people will choose a lot of different themes in the life. For instance, even the physical body that people have is something that they choose. Different themes that people may have in their lifetimes, and generally older souls choose more difficult lessons because they're more equipped. Much like, if you're going to be a postgraduate student, you're going to have a harder curriculum than some maybe a nursery school. But I guess it's all subjective. From that person in nursery school, proportionately, it might be similar, but to what that person is proportionally going through in post grad. But the general themes of career path, relationships, physical health conditions are all a part, of one's soul path. Generally speaking, why people choose challenges, from my understanding, is really to evolve, to learn, to forgive, and it's really all about growth. I mean, the big theme about life on Earth as well as life on the other side is that it's one giant classroom. The
Mhm.
classroom, doesn't stop, and people actually, when they do cross over, and they come through, let's say, mediumship readings, are still talking about classes that they're taking, reviewing their lives, seeing how they could improvise, improve, and evolve more. So there's no retirees, on the other side. It's not one big retirement home. It could certainly feel restorative, but the work continues on a soul level in terms of figuring out how we could be more compassionate, loving, understanding, and deeply more true to our core as infinite spiritual beings, transcending lifetime in and lifetime out. So, I think it's really all there's subjectivity to a lot of this, certainly, but the objectivity is evolution throughout the pre-life, pre-birth planning phase that people have. And so that's really kind of what I've gathered, but it's something that is a collective decision and not something that we would agree upon if the higher soul doesn't want to do it. Certainly, these are all suggestions, but the higher self in our soul needs to agree to do these first and foremost. Now, regarding your question about fate and destiny, yeah, that's also fascinating. Certainly, there's free will, that's undeniable. There's certainly things that are laid out, but there is free will. For instance, there are people who come, to my office who remember certain exit points, points in their lives when they were meant to, let's say, go but didn't. Near death experience certainly could, I think, count as an exit point, if you will. But, there's the soul on a deeper level has this opportunity to cross over, but it doesn't, feel that it's ready to or wants to at this time. Now, for people who have lost a loved one, that would be very hard to hear because you could imagine that you'd feel like, oh my God, when they cross over, they want to leave me, they are abandoning me. And in reality, all of this life is work for the spirit realm. That's where we belong to. We're forever connected to each other, but our work is really, for the spirit realm. And that's up to each soul's decision. It's not personal, it's not an abandonment, it's nothing on anyone about nothing to do with anyone who they leave behind. In fact, frequently in past life regressions, once people leave the body, they continuously comfort those who they have left behind, and they are sending them love, throughout their entire journeys. And so, um, that doesn't stop. And, souls really are able to have full clarity, when they go, but also they're present and there with them who they leave behind. So they're always with us, if you will.
There's so much going through my mind right now. There's a lot that happens up here when we have these sorts of conversations.
Mhm,
One is that I love that we can go back and pick up certain things, understand
mhm,
why did I choose this particular body?
mhm,
Why did I choose this particular thing, these types of relationships, these people who are in my life? There's also something there that I'm picking up around activation,
mhm,
as if going back and bringing those things to your consciousness, to your
mhm,
forefront, just like through hypnotherapy or regression, all of those things, when it's brought from the subconscious, which is informing our actions without us knowing, but when it's brought to the conscious mind, where then it becomes part of our free will choice to align ourselves with our soul path and blueprint,
mhm,
how it can change things.
mhm,
Because I tell people all the time when they understand, oh, well, this is part of my path, but then they are mad at it. They're like,
mhm,
I don't want to do something because I'm supposed to do something. I want to do something because I choose to do something.
mhm,
I totally understand that. That's free will, bro. But then at the same time, what you're also doing, since your higher self and your soul ultimately agreed to that before you incarnated, is you have an internal war because
mhm,
you're fighting yourself. You're fighting what you already chose for yourself. You're fighting these things. So it becomes more in that manner, in my opinion, about following a karmic path,
mhm,
understanding that you have free will, you can choose whatever you want to choose, you can learn and grow however you want to learn. And part of that learning is just your karmic path that will eventually bring you where you're meant to be, anyways. And that
mhm.
almost becomes a catch 22 for some people. Have you found that to be true in with your clients about the activation of purpose versus like the karmic journey?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the genesis, of man and woman, if you will. I'm certainly not a theologian, but you talk about a diaspora from heaven in the story of Adam and Eve, if you believe it or not. In reality, it's just a lesson of how sometimes the ego takes over versus listening to this higher wisdom or higher guidance that knows better. And from listening to this egoic driven mind, that could lead to a great hubris and a great fall, if you will, and literally a fall from heaven, if you will. So I think for people, it's very important to really discern our egoic voice versus the voice of spirit, and recognizing that spirit sees things a thousand steps ahead of us, and having the humility in vulnerability to be able to say, I don't know all the answers, and there's a higher channel that knows more than me, and I'm just going to surrender to this when I'm in a predicament or stuck. I'll just simply ask spirit to be my guide. But it's amazing the degree of arrogance that is in all of us, that we're all working on, that is able to really understand that spirit, God, the universe, is far more vast in its understanding than ourselves. And if we're able to really take ourselves, remove ourselves sometimes a way, we could really live a lot more in unison with higher flow and intelligence, and thus our lives will be taken to new heights, and timelines will be enhanced, and evolution will be expedited once we're really on track and in flow with this higher stream of awareness.
I feel like it has also to do with like the spirit. You said the word evolution, and
Mhm,
it basically is that evolution of the soul through life.
mhm,
Because a young person, a young human, in their life, they are all of that ego. They are trying to
mhm,
learn their autonomy. They're trying to learn who they are. And
mhm,
so a lot of that push or that inner war, that inner battle comes from, I'm going to say, a slightly immature soul, not because they are not mature in their minds, but because there's something that happens when you can know who you are, become autonomous in yourself, and then decide to have faith and trust in
mhm,
your God self, in the higher source, just knowing that everything is working out for your good, that everything is creating and opening a path for you to do the things that you came here to do and to serve in the way that you're meant to serve. So it almost feels like that in itself is part of the karmic journey, to learn how to do that for yourself.
Yeah, it's hard. We've taught to really second guess ourselves from day one. From day one, we're told, hey, we're small, we're blank canvases, we know nothing, and someone bigger and better knows more than what we do. And so there's such a degree of self disempowerment that happens to each of us. And I think part of that is we've had this prescription, handed to us from thousands of years of all these things to do. We check off those boxes and we find that it's not really, clicking. And then ultimately that leads to a midlife crisis, if you will. Then people start to have these existential questions, and that could really be transformative. So, death of a loved one, or death of an ego, or death of, um, certain prescription of life leads to a rebirth of understanding. And that's a beautiful position to be in.
I love the self empowerment piece. That's exactly what that is,
Mm,
learning how to make your own decisions, but knowing that that's aligned with your higher self.
mm,
There was something that came to my mind earlier, and you don't have to touch on it if you don't want
Sure.
to, but it is definitely a thought.
Mm,
You started talking about exit points.
mhm,
What about entry points? Because I have found that during healing work, women specifically who have gone through miscarriages or even abortions, there's always a reason the soul came in knowing it was going to have an exit point before its birth.
mhm,
And I've noticed that just from my perspective in this, that it creates some sort of portal that does something for that soul as far as its personal evolution, and then also for the person,
mm.
whether it's guiding them for a moment, bringing them through their spiritual awakening, whatever that is. But entry points, do you have any
Mhm.
thoughts on entry points?
Yeah, I mean, from a lot of the colleagues that I have who are reputable evidential mediums, generally in terms of these points, it's just a way of these souls, becoming a part of our journey, and they just kind of, brush kind of our field. And then ultimately, what a lot of people find is these souls who might have been, miscarried or aborted, they generally reincarnate in different ways where they interact with us. You may not be a child, but it could be someone that we maybe counsel or just cross paths with. But it's just their way of kind of getting on our radar, if you will. And there's like this type of calling, and maybe, that moment wasn't there, but then eventually, that connection, does kind of click on a deeper level on another part of someone's timeline. So it's fascinating, but I do find generally, a lot of those souls tend to come back and have closer parallels with the lives that we live at a later point in time.
So we're going to switch gears for a second here. Show us your books, Jacob.
Okay. Yeah. So this is my first book, Life After Breath.
Mm,
And this was um, really my first, well, this is a memoir of my near death experience. And if familiar with the terms of karma, which is, certainly themes that we deal with as regression therapists. Karma is just kind of this story. And, this was my personal story of my near death experience and what life was like, to live with it. So it's profound. It gets people into my NDE and post NDE, not just life. It's life after death, but life after near death, if you will, and really touches a lot of people. And there's a lot of relatability to it. It was published by Waterside, out in Waterside Productions out in California. And my next book is The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, and you could kind of see the rungs of the ladder, if you will. And that book is more of my Dharma. And for those of you who might have heard the term Dharma, I reference it in terms of my book where it's more of the growth of the soul, the meaning and the lessons from my near death experience. So karma is kind of like that story, but dharma is how we define that story and how the soul was able to grow through that experience. So they're both available, in Amazon and a lot of indie based publishers, but it was just wonderful to really get to publish these two books and to define the story and to give it over to other people. And I kind of live by by that quote by Picasso that says the meaning of life is to find your gift and the purpose of it is to give it away. And as you know, with gifts, there's always this struggle that we have with it where it takes a long time to see it as such. And my near death experience was something that I saw that just was a bit of a burden for a long period of my life. But once I recognized that it was a gift to be shared to other people, that really infused my sense of purpose and giving the story away. I mean, literally and metaphorically. Yeah.
beautiful. What was your near death experience, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah. I am celebrating right now my 32nd anniversary of my near death experience. It was just this September of 1993. So 32 years ago. And I'm not great with math. Sometimes I botch the numbers, but that was 32 years ago, right? To give my age away. And I had a condition called whooping cough, otherwise known as pertussis.
Mhm.
And I went to a ladder onto a slide and I literally suffocated as a result of this cough, where all parts of my body were completely deprived of oxygen or any of life force. And I was able to feel my brain literally crack open due to the deprivation of oxygen. And that's when I crossed over, went through the tunnel, and had this incredible, euphoric, mystical near death experience. Just for time's sake, I was able to really encounter things that clients experience in life between life regressions, the things that we talked about earlier today, where I experienced my own primary spirit guides. I saw an endless array of angels all around me. I was able to see my soul pod or soul group that I connected with. I had awareness of past life memories, premonitions of the life that I would be, living and the work that I'm doing, encountered with God and the creative source of all of life force in itself. And it was just the most euphoric, climactical, endless experience that one can possibly have. To this day, I have a hard time putting words on it, as most near-death experiencers do. I'll give an example. I always use this, like, I don't know, my color is of my shirt is black, and this is kind of like a darker green, if you will. And the colors that we describe in this reality are just based on the colors of the prisms of the sun and the range of colors of the sun. That's our that's where we get these colors from. But when you're on the other side, there obviously is no physical sun. The sun is the eternal light of God. And so the colors are so much different than over here that there's very little descriptive words that we have because we're talking about something that goes beyond this 3D reality. You're in the fifth dimension, so that's just one example. The other is, most people are used to being bioneurochemical in our bodies. And so we could have the best meal, the greatest intimacy, just a great high from winning a game, whatever that is. And there's just this certain point that we feel like we hit, and then we just go down. When I was in heaven on the other side, there was no limitation. There was no like ceiling that I hit. It was just this endless feeling of euphoric joy and jubilation that goes beyond any comparative experience that I've had in this lifetime, to a degree. So, but essentially, I was obviously I came back. I didn't have a death experience. Otherwise, I might be coming through a medium, if you will. But I stretched that rubber band over here, and I came back to this reality. And the reason why I did come was through the power of decision. Most near-death experiencers, due to most, based on research, around 75 to 70% near-death experiencers are told that it's not your time to go, that there's more work to be done on a soul level and to kind of finish, what you started in this body. But for whatever reason, I was given autonomy, and that was really the hardest decision that I had in my life to this day. And no regrets, doing the work that I did, but I stayed just because I saw this premonition of doing the work that I'm doing. And so I have this quote that says, transcendent experiences are great. Out of body experiences are great. All these profound spiritual experiences are great. But if you really want to have something expansive, lean into acts of service to others. That's the most expansive thing that you can do. And that's really what I saw myself doing was, giving over this information to others and, speaking to people and just reminding people of who they are, where they come from, why they're here. And that's a big part of my soul's mission. So, as great as the other side is, there's nothing more expansive than acts of service because to me, that's the closest embodiment to the divine, is being of service to another. And with that decision, I obviously came back into my body. But the last thing that I was aware of was a little bit of buyer's remorse. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm coming back to the body and stuff like that. And the guides were really clear on the power of the blueprint that we have as souls, the power of our thoughts that we all have, and how those could sway us or keep us more on track with the lives that we live. And with that, I woke up in a hospital bed. My mother was around me, and the rest is kind of history.
Beautiful. And you chose your Dharma rather than to take that exit point. And that is, how old were you?
I was 3 years old, so just by which again is very thought provocative.
Mhm.
But I would preface that we always hear this statement: we are infinite spiritual beings having a finite human experience. Well, what does that really mean? That means we are timeless, we are ageless at our core. So we are all just having this experience temporarily in this body. This isn't the totality of who we are. This is just an experience. And at the same time, you couldn't be Mary as you know it, in this lifetime, and I can't be Jacob as I know it in this lifetime. So this is the one unique lifetime to be who we are as we know it in this body in this lifetime. And at the same time, there's a big, gap at times between chronological age and what's really going underneath the surface in terms of the infinite soul wisdom and the soul's age. And so this experience wasn't 3-year-old, Jacob. It was my eternal soul having this direct experience, which goes far beyond, my chronological age.
Can I ask how old you were? Because I am thinking of two different things here because I am thinking of the soul age and which was obviously very evolved to
Mhm.
make that decision. But then I'm also thinking of basically just your path and knowing that because you could see your dharmic path and how
Mhm.
we have to live that karmically. How old were you when you realized what you were supposed to do with that near death experience? How long was that journey?
Mhm. Well, I always knew. I just, what does Jesus say? You'll doubt me 3 times before the rooster crows, kind of thing. So my human part took over. There was a great deal of doubt that I've, picked up through the years. And in reality, I inherited a lot of people's limitations that they put on me instead of believing in myself, which is certainly universal and part of that hero's journey, if you will.
Mhm.
Sometimes to find yourself, you lose yourself and you find, yourself again. That waxed and waned throughout my life, but it was always there. There was one experience, though, that I could pinpoint that really validated what I knew. This is in my books, but there was a moment in time where I was really acting out of line. I was probably in my later teens, early 20s, still living at home. Thank God I got my own place these days. But yeah, that was they talking about. Yeah, nothing against my parents, but that's biologically wired for most people, right? To just have your own autonomy, and that's really the way that we're raised. But you know, I was just acting out. My parents said, "All right, you're not to live here for now. Go to, your grandparents," kind of thing. And I got where they were coming from. I fully understood. I at the time probably deserved it, but I, walked around the corner of my house, and I was once again in a playground, different playground where I had my near-death experience. But it just dawned on me how no matter how disenfranchised or kicked out of the world we may feel, we are all eternal children playing in the playground of God as our brothers and sisters keeper. And it just kind of clicked on me as to that bit of lesson that I had as a child who had this NDE in a playground, and really what that lesson meant for myself and for others. And then a couple days later, I went to this yoga seminar, this kind of like weekend thing. And this woman who I had no idea who she was, she came up to me and she started telling me things that no one else would know. This was before I ever got public about any of this stuff. And she says, you're going to be a profound healer one day and help out a lot of people. And I see a lot of crowds and people that you're going to be talking to. And that's really exactly what I saw in my near death experience, just being able to share this to other people. So that was evidential validation of the premonition that I had that really said, hey, you know what? You're not crazy, dude. Like this is your path. And that piece of evidence gave me a lot of confidence to trust in what I saw. And hopefully the life that I'm living is really able to align with that vision to my highest degree.
Beautiful. Now, there's a lot of correlations and a play of words even because you're Jacob. So of course this was a play on Jacob's ladder from the Bible. You were on a ladder when you had the near
Mhm.
death experience, correct?
Yes, yeah, in a playground, yeah.
And then through this vision, you said that you ended up essentially in this book with the steps to ascension.
Mhm.
Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, like I said, God works sometimes in mysterious ways, sometimes very humorous, simple, and symbolic or allegorical ways. But yeah, for many people, I think to a degree, your name reveals the potential that you have. And I don't think it was random, that Jacob was the name that I chose, but the amount of parallels. Jacob was literally running from his life due to the covenant with his brother Esau, I believe, and he slept on a bed of rocks, in the land of Israel. And I actually did went to the site of where Jacob's had a supposed dream. It's in a place called Beit El. Bayit in Hebrew means house. El means of God. So he had his dream in, the house of God, if you will. But he had this dream where he saw the angels going up and down the ladder, and he literally was able to meet with God in the kingdom of heaven when he ascended, the ladder. So, and he saw the angels coming up and down the ladder, coming from the heavens down to the earth, really just showing how the angelic realm, yes, is very lofty, but also it's connected to each and every one of us. Something that I saw in my near death experience, where I saw all of the endless sea of angels that were around me on that day and around all of us, as human beings. They are not far away. They are just a sliver that's gossamer thin beyond this veil of reality. They're all around us. And so, when you think of a ladder, you think of different degrees of ascension. And I always say the higher you go, the more that you can see. And I think that really speaks to, in my understanding, spiritual evolution. As we're able to ascend and go higher, the more that we can understand about God, about life, and we could see things in such a different, broader view. And that's profound, because life really is all about perspective. And when you have the God channel or the God lens that you're looking at life, boy, does that change the reality that you're looking at, and you're really becoming who you are. Just we all are, a droplet of God. And that's really what life is about, is just expanding, on that true form of the self.
How do you feel about having a controversial conversation for a couple minutes?
Okay, yeah, I have a couple of minutes. Controversial, always, that leads to certain, just understandings, and just allows me to see things in different ways too.
And it might not be controversial. So we talk a lot about how in between lives, you're basically seeing the soul space. You're seeing
Mhm.
God and what you refer to as heaven. So, in your personal perspective, just since we're talking about that, that automatically leads the mind a lot of the time to, well, what's the opposite of that? And since you experience that, do you feel in your personal belief system and from what you've seen that a hell space exists?
Not personally and or professionally. I certainly do believe that it exists, but it exists within our minds and layers of separation. The light of God or the other side doesn't have a hellish realm. We've created that through our own degrees of separation. And so ultimately, by going to the light and really facing ourselves and our actions, in a way, are we able to kind of heal from things. But to me, the closest thing to hell is to live when people live by the me consciousness. And so the me consciousness is, I don't care what I do to someone else, as long as I'm climbing this social or material ladder to go up, then I'm going to do what I do. And spirituality is really about that we consciousness. Is really my friend Karen Noe wrote this book called This We Consciousness, where she actually channeled the works of Wayne Dyer, and I just love the terms that she was able to channel. But the we consciousness is really understanding what you do to another, you do to yourself. And that is what people experience in near death experience, myself included, which is what's called a life review, where you're able to see the actions that you do to others, not just from your prism, but from their prism. People will forget, as Maya Angelou says, what you might have said, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Mhm.
And so, for us to really understand how God works or how the other side works, is really to live in this me consciousness, this we consciousness, not this me consciousness. The closest thing to hell is that separation. That's that me consciousness. We are separated from the greater collective whole. Ultimately, though, on the other side, there's healing, there's growth, there's evolution, but the way out is through, and you have to eventually face your actions and how they made others feel. But it's not portrayed in a very demeaning, derogatory way. It's portrayed as an way of opportunity, and a very much presented as a loving way without any form of judgment. I think we're all traumatized by our principals, policemen, parents, nothing on them, that if we do something, we get in trouble. On the other side, it's not, the case. We're loved for who we are. And ultimately, the healing comes from really shedding all those degrees of separation on the other side.
Unconditional love, always, everywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for being on. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours, but I'm happy and fulfilled with what we were able to get today. Do you want to tell everybody about your upcoming events, any conferences you have going on?
Yeah, I just got back from the Omega Institute up in, Rhinebeck, and so we have a lot of different programs right now, going on for 2026. Some of them have a little bit of an NDA, so I can't really get into the full of all that which is to come. But I would just say stay posted with jacobLcooper.com for the events. I do my best I can to put them up. I know I'm going to be in Phoenix, Arizona this upcoming August for the Helping Parents Heal conference. And they have it every 2 years. And so I'm going to be over there alongside some pretty powerful luminaries, including, if you're familiar with David Kessler, I know John Holland is going to be there. My friend Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, amongst many others, is going to be presenting at Helping Parents Heal. But they're just a great group that helps people who might be dealing with grief to maybe to look at afterlife consciousness as a way to really enhance their connections with their loved ones. So I'm going to be doing that. I just have an upcoming continuing education course too on my website for therapists to understand a lot of these spiritual phenomena and really normalizing the paranormal and destigmatizing a lot of these things so that we're better equipped to support clients who come into our office to not push their heads underwater more, but rather to bring them up to the surface and help them thrive. So that's a little bit, and I have some cool documentaries coming up that I'm going to be a part of. So a lot of stuff in store. But stay posted, and I also have a YouTube channel, the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder as well, and do a lot of fun podcasts, like Earth and Star, spiritual wellness, that you have here. So I really do appreciate the good work that you're doing, Mary, as well.
Thank you so much. You guys, I'm going to have his YouTube channel, his website, all of that's going to be in the description here. So you can get those books and learn about the steps to ascension and everything. Is there anything else you want anybody here to know, or anything else you want to say?
No, I just hope, viewers were able to take it as something out of this conversation. I always say in any interaction that you have in life, you come in with a certain degree of consciousness, you may decide to leave something behind, and hopefully you could take something with you. And hopefully, this conversation, as well as other videos that Mary does and other guests, that there's always something that you could take with you. And as Tony Robbins says, the quality of your life becomes the quality of your focus. And really, that's predicated on a lot of the information that we get. And so I'm just so glad that you're having these types of conversations to get in, some of that information so that people could really transform their lives in more powerful ways. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and being part of it, and for you having those conversations as well, and for serving and living your Dharma and putting it out there to help shine that light for everybody. It's been such an honor to have you, Jacob. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.